Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here, and the A4 ranked season has officially kicked off today, and the set's only been out for a few days. I've spent the last 24 hours playtesting and studying every new deck and new card that has came to Pokemon Pocket in this new expansion, and today I'm going to be giving you the decks that I believe are the best decks to play for this ranked season this week, at least early right now. There are some strong contender decks right off the bat. We've got Giratina Darkrai here on the screen, and that is no surprise. We're going to get right into it, guys. There are timestamps down below, so feel free to use those. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's dive right into it. So first and foremost, guys, we do have Giratina and Darkrai. And, you know, we always talk about Giratina and Darkrai. In fact, at the end of last season, Giratina Darkrai, I believe, won the last tournament of the last season, as well as the first tournament of last season, if I remember correctly. The thing about Giratina Darkrai is that it's very, very consistent. It's got a whole bunch of cards that do a lot of different things, but no matter what, as long as you've gotten Giratina EX and Darkrai EX on your board, you're probably going to be doing something pretty, impressive, honestly. And that's what I really love about Giratina Darkrai, but it's also kind of what I hate about Giratina Darkrai is how dang consistent this deck is. Early on in formats, people tend to forget about Giratina Darkrai, and in general forget a lot about all of the best decks of the previous formats. They're busy playing all of the new cards. So if you are somebody that maybe hasn't opened a lot of the new cards in A4, or you're just sort of looking to play, whatever you really think is the best option, I actually do think Giratina Darkrai is probably, if not the best option for ranked mode right now, it's certainly one of them. We have 8 decks in this video, but yeah, Giratina Darkrai, consistent. People aren't really teching for it. They're not really playing around it, and it's always going to be a strong choice, especially at the beginning of the ranked season. I don't really have anything else to say about Giratina Darkrai, quite frankly. I think we all understand this deck list, and nothing has really changed. Yes, I mean, there are some trainer cards that came out in A4 that you could run in Giratina Darkrai. Things like Silver kind of pops out to me, but that's really it. And most of the decks that people are playing in tournaments right now and in ranked mode, if they're playing Giratina Darkrai, are not playing Silver. So I think we're more just still playing the Mars and red card combination. Of course, we've gotten Sabrina, Cyrus, a giant cape. The Rocky helmets are definitely really big, and then the healing for Pokemon Center Lady really does come in clutch, and then red to boost the damage. This deck has it all, honestly, and I don't think it really needs to be changed. I think that there are some good cards that came out in A4, but none of them really change Giratina Darkrai too much. And like I said, people aren't really counterplaying Darktina. So anyway, Giratina Darkrai, got to get that one immediately right out of the way. And next up is going to be Dragonite EX. And no, this is not a meme. We did talk about Dragonite EX at the beginning of the last season when it was released, but the deck did struggle with some inherent inconsistencies. Dragonite EX is back, and I do think that it's actually better than it ever has been before. It's interesting, a couple of cards came out in A4 that specifically buffed Dragonite EX pretty dramatically. One of those being the new Pichu baby card here with Crackly Toss. It allows us to generate lightning energies to our benched Pokemon for 0 energy cost, which is really strong. The main reason for this is that it kind of reduces, or I guess removes, the need for us to run dual energies in Dragonite. That's the big one, right? Between Zeraora and Pichu, which kind of just generate lightning energies out of nowhere, that allows us to play only water energies in our Dragonite deck, and then from there, we're basically able to more consistently have the energy attack cost that Dragonite kind of struggled with sometimes. It's always been a really strong card, but, if there's 5 to 10% of games where we don't get the both energies that we need, then unfortunately, we're losing those games, and that's just a big hit to Dragonite's win rate. No longer an issue with Pichu and then Zeraora combined here. And then we have Elemental Switch, which is going to allow us to move those lightning energies from Zeraora to Dragonite. That is definitely very, very important. The other cards that came out in A4 that dramatically buffed Dragonite, most importantly, are probably going to be Lyra. So Lyra is specifically a card that gets around Dragonite's Giga Impact downside for its attack. 180 damage, but during your next turn, you can attack. Now, effects like this, similar to Buzzwole, get wiped if we retreat to the bench, or if we move to the bench and then come back into the active spot. All negative effects on Dragonite will be reset. So Lyra allows us to switch, not retreat, but switch Dragonite with one of our bench Pokemon if it has any damage onto it. This effectively allows us to double pivot. We have 1 Cleffa and 2 Pichu, which have free retreat. And then we also have 1 copy of Old Amber, which is a fossil that we can also use effectively as a free retreat mon to double pivot back into Dragonite. So Lyra dramatically increases, I guess, or fixes that one issue, or one of the issues that Dragonite EX had. So the combination of Pichu, Elemental Switch, Zeraora, and Lyra really kind of completes the whole package for Dragonite. And now it is a much more consistent and viable high roll deck option. We're going to use the term high roll a couple of times in this video, and really what it determines, or I guess the definition that I use high roll for is a deck that is extremely strong, but of course, you know, is required to play, you know, various different cards in a combination to, you know, achieve that outcome. We've seen decks like this before. The original high roll card back in the day was Moltres and Charizard. It wasn't super consistent, but if you did get the full combo off, it was almost unbeatable. Dragonite is very much similar to that. So I think the buffs to Dragonite are basically here to make it the #1 high roll deck in the game right now. 180 damage will KO basically everything. So Dragonite EX is a very valuable and a very volatile deck in the format right now. Honestly, probably one of the strongest decks in the entire game. There's some other high roll decks that are still popular in the format, but this is sort of like the highest of the high roll decks, honestly. The other card that's interesting in here is Cleffa. And I think that Cleffa is massively underrated. I don't know if it's as important to this deck as Pichu is, but again, it's another Pokemon with free retreat. It's another baby Pokemon that doesn't require us to attach any energies to it, and it's going to give us some more, I guess, draw power going first if we do lead with Cleffa. It's more of a consistency card here. And since we're playing Dragonite, we don't have to play red or any damage modifications because we hit so hard. And we don't have to play things like Sabrina and Giovanni because we're 1-hit KOing any Pokemon that we play, or Sabrina and Cyrus. So there it is. That's Dragonite EX. It's much better now than it was. And I know that some people kind of have in their minds that Dragonite is a meme, but honestly, it's a real deck now in this format, and it's something that we have to look out for. We'll have to see exactly how consistent it is or how valuable this sort of damage is for Dragonite, but I do think that it is sort of a top contender early on in this format. So big shout out to Dragonite EX, and like I said, as long as you get those Pichus and those Cleffas, which might be kind of interesting and tough to pull, right? Because they are 3-star or 3 diamond cards, so they're somewhat rare, right? They're like holo rares. You got to get the Lyra's Energy Switch. Again, these are all new cards that are absolutely crucial to Dragonite, but if you have them, definitely a strong choice. Next up is going to be Sylvally. So I honestly do feel that Oricorio in general is massively underrated, and to be honest with you, I think still the best way to play Oricorio is with Sylvally. It's kind of the same combination that we had in the previous format, where it was one of the most consistent aggressive decks in Sylvally, paired with the #1 control Pokemon in the game, Oricorio, with its Safeguard ability. Should we go back? By the way, Giratina Darkrai plays only dark energies, and then, of course, Dragonite, this deck, as we said, only plays water energies. I might put that in the timestamps below, just so it's easy for you guys to see. I know some people are going to comment about it for sure. Anyway, yeah, Oricorio and Sylvally. Now, the main difference with this deck list is instead of playing the Energy Switch Zera Aura package, we're now just playing Pichu, and I think that's actually really, really smart. Pichu has free retreat, so what Pichu is going to allow us to do is basically do the exact same thing that Zera Aura did before with Energy Switch or with Dawn, and it allows us to get that attack off with Sylvally on our second turn if we're going first. And Sylvally's always been an incredibly strong Pokemon going second, but going first, it can feel kind of bad. Pichu does remove that problem. All of the baby Pokemon in general remove the problem of going first. So I think this deck list is completely streamlined. I think it's got everything it could possibly need. Pichu is here to buff Sylvally, allow it to attack on your second turn going first. Oricorio to sometimes just auto-win matchups, and then of course Sylvally is really, really strong. We are playing 2 Gladion, of course, 2 Pokeball, 2 Research. Those are cards that you absolutely need in the deck list. 1 Giovanni, which again, I do think is also correct. There's enough times where Sylvally just doesn't do enough damage, especially against opposing Sylvallies, because it only hits for 100 damage. And it is, of course, reliant on playing supporter cards. So we're playing a ton of different supporter cards in the deck. Giovanni makes sense. 1 Cyrus, 1 Sabrina, 1 Mars. These are all staple supporter cards that you definitely should be playing in Sylvally. And then Guzma as well, which is kind of interesting. You could play something in place of Guzma, but I do like this choice here. And then one of the new Silver cards. Silver is funny because it is a card that kind of nerfs Sylvally technically, but it's also one of the best supporter cards you can play in Sylvally. Really, really strong. It's going to pull a supporter card out of your opponent's hand. Allows you to also see your opponent's hand, which is very valuable information. I think Silver is a very strong card, especially early in the game. Yeah, Sylvally Oricorio, I think it's honestly been buffed now. I know not a lot of people are going to want to play Oricorio, and that's just the reality of it. Early on in formats, people want to play the new cards. They want to play, you know, something shiny or something crazy. But to be fair, you know, play your Giratina Darkrais, play your Oricorio Sylvallies. Like, that's how you get to Master Ball rank. It might not be the most fun thing in the world, but theoretically speaking, it probably will give you one of the best odds. And I'm pretty confident that it will. That's why we had to include them in the video. So this video is going to have some new decks and some old decks, so stay tuned for later in the video for sure. Yeah, Sylvally Oricorio. And again, you know, there's some different packages here for Pichu. Like, I'm trying to think. Like, we have Arceus, you have the new Lantern, you got Tapu Koko, you even have Pikachu EX, which hits for 150. Like, there's a lot of stuff that we can play with the Pichu sort of Lightning type package, but honestly, if you're playing Lightning type right now, like, it's most worth it to play Oricorio, Arceus, Tapu Koko. Like, all of those cards are really aggressive and not bad whatsoever, but they're not Oricorio, you know? So I think that if you are playing this Lightning package, or if you're playing Lightning type in general, you really should play Oricorio, because it is one of the highest win rate Pokemon of all time in Pokemon Pocket, especially early format. People aren't teching for Oricorio, and I do think Sylvally is the best partner for it. So anyway, let's move on here to what we're kind of, I guess, discussing here as the counterplay to Oricorio, which is going to be Donphan Rampardos. So this deck list here, and really all of these decks, have placed really highly in online tournaments just in the first day or two. Donphan is actually really impressive. 160 HP, and the attack here that does 50 damage for 1 energy on a stage 1 Pokemon means that Donphan's actually really strong going first if we draw into it, and that is certainly really important. It's really tanky, right? It just lives a bunch of hits here. The cool thing about Donphan is that Phanpy here, although this player is playing the 20 damage Phanpy, you can play the 30 damage Phanpy here and then 1-hit KO baby Pokemon. So, pick and choose. You do deal 10 damage to yourself, but if you would rather play the new Phanpy, go ahead and do that. It hits for 30. But the coolest thing about here is that we're guaranteed to lead with Phanpy, right? Because we're playing fossils, right? So fossils don't count as basic Pokemon. So our leadoff is always Phanpy, and that's certainly pretty cool. But Rampardos is going to basically wall Oricorio decks. It's going to kind of mill through or just absolutely blast through any lightning type deck, which is definitely really relevant. It's really strong against Sylvally as well. Rampardos is just a really strong Pokemon, and the 50 damage from Donphan plus the 130 from Rampardos adds up to be enough to KO basically any Pokemon in the game. But this interaction goes beyond that. Donphan's a Pokemon that you put it into the active spot and then you just keep attaching to it. You just attach and you attack and you attach and you attack, and it's going to stick around for a long time. It's going to do quite a bit of damage. But the cool thing about Rampardos is that it's a 1 energy attack cost, right? So we never have to commit any energies to Rampardos or the fossils until we're ready to attack with it, until it actually comes up into the active spot, which means that all of those energies that we're attaching subsequently can all just go to Donphan, which, does synergize fairly well. 2 research here, 1 Lyra, and Lyra is actually a smart choice in Donphan since we have a lot of HP and it allows us to basically retreat out for free. That's very valuable for sure. It's really strong to kind of string together Donphans before you go into Rampardos. A really, really fun and good strategy here. 1 Silver, again, just a decent supporter card, right? A little bit of control there with 1 red card. I like this combo. Hand Disruption's always going to be good right now. Tons of baby Pokemon and tons of Sylvally, not Sylvally, but Sylveon EX. So the hand disruption between silver and red card is always going to be really good. 1 Cyrus, just because Donphan, of course, doesn't really hit that hard himself, so bringing Pokemon up to KO them with Donphan is a win condition. Guzma as well, to discard things like Rocky Helmet or Giant Cape. 2 Rare Candy, of course, to evolve into Rampardos. 2 Pokeball, or 1 Pokeball rather. We don't need 2 because we only played 2 basic Pokemon, so that's really cool about this deck. Only 1 Pokeball needed, and then 1 Pokemon Communications, which, is pretty interesting. I think that this deck here is playing 1 copy of Cranidos and 2 Rampardos. Theoretically speaking, like Cranidos is always a really interesting inclusion in Donphan. It's going to be really good against Oricorio, right? For 1 energy on a stage 1 Pokemon, you can 1-hit KO Oricorio. That's very valuable. If Oricorio is very common in the format, I think Cranidos is the correct decision, but it does theoretically make Pokemon Communications a bit worse, right? Because it's increasing 1 type of Pokemon. You're adding an extra unique Pokemon tier deck, which is going to make Pokemon Communications less consistent. So there is a case to be made to cut this Cranidos. If you don't really want to worry too much about Oricorio, cut the Cranidos and then play just 1 other card in the deck. It's going to make Pokecom more consistent. You could even play 2 Pokecoms, or you could play just any other like supporter or trainer card in the deck. So keep that in mind. Donphan Rampardos is a real deck, and it is actually a really, really strong deck. In fact, I actually think it's the best fighting type deck that we've had in a very long time in Pokemon Pocket. Not a ton of new cards here. Of course, Donphan EX is needed, but it does incorporate mostly old cards from previous sets, which is definitely pretty unique. Yeah, Donphan EX. I love it. I really think Donphan is really strong. We're not playing Hiker in here. The deck list I made a couple days ago tried to incorporate Hiker, but in general, I think a streamlined strategy like this is probably just better. The hand disruption is probably going to be more valuable, to be 100% honest with you. Especially in my play testing, like hand disruption is still super, super good. If you can fit it into your deck list, I would honestly recommend doing it. You're just going to win more games that way. So anyway, Donphan EX. It's pretty good. One of my favorites, honestly, from the new set. Next up, guys, is our shameless plug. So, of course, 63.6% of you guys that are watching my content here are not subscribed to the channel, which is actually pretty good. You guys have been doing pretty good by hitting that subscribe button, but we just hit 30,000 subscribers. And again, guys, it's completely free and it supports me and it supports the channel. So if you've been watching my content and you enjoy the videos, consider hitting that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Okay, next up is our friend Charizard. So, you know, what can we say? Like, similar to Giratina and Darkrai, Charizard still exists, and it's still a very strong Pokemon. And that's really all I have to say about it. I mean, Charizard is sort of, or kind of was the high roll deck of last format, and I do think it's very similar to Dragonite in that sense, where you know, it's extremely strong, but it is certainly a combo deck, and you got to draw all of those cards properly to kind of pop off and do really strongly with Charizard. There's 3 really strong Stage 2 rare candy decks in the format right now. One is Dragonite, which is like a fully like maximum high roll deck. It's probably the least consistent option, but it's by far the strongest, right? Hitting for 180. There's also Crobat EX, which we might take a look at later in this video, which is a much more consistent and aggressive version of these high roll rare candy decks. And then in the middle, there's Charizard. So if it was a spectrum, I'll use my hands here, right? We've got Crobat on one end, Dragonite on one end, and then in the middle we have Charizard. So it's this sort of nice middle ground as far as these rare candy high roll decks go. 150 is 150. That's still KOing a lot of Pokemon, and Charizard really is a lot more consistent than you might think. We are still going to struggle with things like Oricorio, but as you see, this deck list here is not accounting for Oricorio because, again, people don't really play it in the early format. Again, if you want to win games and you want to rank up early in this ranked season, I would recommend playing Oricorio. I won't be playing Oricorio personally because I just want to test decks and I want to have fun. So, but if you're really serious about grinding, Oricorio is the deck for you. But yeah, Charizard EX is still Charizard. Nothing's really changed about it. This deck is, instead of not counting for Oricorio, we're playing Hand Disruption, like I said, because a lot of decks are just weak to Hand Disruption. So it's probably something that's it's smart to consider, to be honest with you. 1 Pokecom, 2 Research, 2 Lily, 2 Pokeball, 1 Giant Cape, 2 Rare Candy, the 2/2 EV Sylveon line, 2/2 Charmander, Charizard line, and then 1 Mars, 1 red card. So it's kind of got a little bit of everything in here. I do love 1 Pokecom in this deck list. However, we're not playing things like Guzma, so it really does depend, right? Like the 150 for Charizard's really clutch, but there are going to be those matchups where your opponent has the Giant Capes, and then of course you're not 1-hit KOing, and it really kind of downplays Charizard. Like, I again would greatly consider playing Guzma in this deck because Giant Cape is still very common, and it's still going to bring a lot of Pokemon above 150, especially things like Giratina, Darkrai, and really any Giratina deck or any Sylveon deck typically plays Giant Cape. So consider Guzma, as always. I always say it on the channel, Guzma's really good at Charizard. The #1 ranked player, literally #1 in the world last season, got to #1 playing Guzma and Charizard EX. So again, just, consider it. Consider playing Guzma here. This list, of course, was placed or taken from a tournament yesterday where the player got second, went all the way to the grand finals here with Charizard. So yeah, nothing else to say. It's Charizard EX. We all know about it. It's really strong. It's definitely a strong option currently right now. Next up is going to be Ho-Oh Lugia. So I know some people were, a little bit on the fence with a deck like this, and to be entirely honest, most people aren't going to be able to build this deck. And I think that has skewed a little bit of the numbers, but I don't think that this is a bad deck whatsoever. I don't know if it's going to be necessarily like the proper choice. It's yet another high roll deck in the format. We have Magby, we have Pichu, we are playing, of course, Ho-Oh and Lugia. And in a deck list like this, you're definitely playing like water energies, and then one of like probably anything else, likely lightning energies is probably what we're doing here. Now, Ho-Oh has colorless energies in the attack cost, but Raikou here as a tech here to get over Oricorios takes 1 lightning and 1 colorless, so you probably do want to play water and lightning energies if you're building the deck specifically like this. Elemental Switch, rather, allows us to move any of those energies to any of our Pokemon, which is definitely really strong. 1 copy of Irida, so we are definitely playing water energies in this deck list. Irida is going to be nice to heal our Pokemon. That is certainly pretty relevant. Guzma to discard those Giant Capes off of those Stage 2 Pokemon with 180 HP, guaranteeing that Lugia can KO anything. So the upside to something like Lugia, similar to Dragonite, it's actually almost entirely similar to Dragonite, where it's a much more, I guess, sort of streamlined, archetype here. Like we don't have to worry about the rare candy combo stuff, right? So it's like you're playing Dragonite. It's a little bit less strong, right? Because Dragonite is more of a high roll deck where you don't discard the energies with Dragonite. You just can't attack next turn, and we have like Lyra and things in place to attack turn after turn, but you still have to deal with the whole rare candy Stage 2 shenanigans. Lugia doesn't. So it's very similar in that sense. It is a little bit awkward. Of course, you got to go with the baby Pokemon, accelerate the energies into Ho-Oh, attack, move them to Lugia. Like, it's not a perfect strategy whatsoever, but you are going to be one-hit killing basically anything with Lugia. So that's the upside to it. Again, it's very similar to Dragonite, except it's a little bit more consistent, but the payoff is a little bit less high, right? Lugia doesn't have 180 HP, and it discards all the energies when you attack. But, if we're being entirely honest with you, we giant cape these Pokemon, we bring them up to 170, and one thing that you have to consider is that, like, you set up the baby Pokemon until they get KO'd, right? Which allows you to set up Ho-Oh, and then once you bring in Ho-Oh, you can just keep attaching to Lugia. Like, it's honestly fairly similar, but we're able to technically attack twice in a row with Lugia sometimes if we pile up enough energies onto it, which is pretty funny, right? If you attack twice with Ho-Oh, you can attack twice with Lugia. It's pretty strong. This is a deck that will lose to some aggro archetypes. It's also probably going to lose to Cyrus, so keep that in mind for sure. And we can't utilize things like Lily because we're all basic Pokemon. So there's upsides and downsides, right? I do think that Lugia, Dragonite are two sides of the same coin. And I think a lot of these high roll decks have actually gotten a lot more consistent, especially going first with the inclusion of baby Pokemon. So that's probably what the format is right now. One thing to consider, though, is that a lot of the high roll decks that are more consistent are playing Sylveon, right? So, it's an interesting sort of balance early on in the format, and it's going to take some time, quite honestly, for us to really figure out which decks are performing the best. Like, early on in the metagame, things are super diverse. Like, if you play ranked ladders right now, there's probably 30 decks that you're going to hit pretty commonly. Now... I guess I'll mention this. I've been seeing a lot of people playing the Magcargo like meme deck in ranked battles. I'm not going to showcase Magcargo in this video, guys. There's probably going to be a comment about it. I'm not talking about Xatu or anything like that, or Typhlosion. Like, we're talking decks that are proven already in the early meta and decks that I've tested that I really consider to be real decks. Now, just because something isn't in this video doesn't mean that it's not good. Of course, we can't talk all day. I think there's probably, 10 to 15 really quality decks that could emerge as significant meta decks in this new format. But for right now, we have 8 decks in this video. These are the 8 decks that I'm most confident in for grinding ranked battles. So yeah, anyway, there you go. That's the tangent. Lugia and Ho-Oh is a deck list. I know some people aren't going to love it, but to be fair, 2 days into the format, most people will not be able to build this deck that is almost entirely compromised of new or composed of new cards from A4. So yeah, I mean, this one's for the whales, honestly. Okay. Next up is Buzzwole. Yeah. Buzzwole, again, similar to Giratina Darkrai, similar to Charizard, Sylvally. Like, this is a deck list that came 2 formats ago and is still one of the strongest, most consistent decks in the entire game. We all know Buzzwole, and it kind of does everything. There's really nothing that Buzzwole can't do. When you take a look at its matchup spreads across the format, like, Buzzwole's going to be good against Giratina Darkrai, but you're going to struggle against, of course, things like Charizard. You're going to do really well into decks that are, of course, weak to grass, but you're going to struggle against decks that just hit really, really hard. Some of the more common decks early on in this format are probably going to be things like Crobat, and I actually do really like Buzzwole against Crobat, right? We can switch in and out to remove the poison. We've got a ton of healing. We've got Leaf Capes to extend the damage. Like, I think Buzzwole actually does really well against Crobat, and of course, we are hitting Darkrai for a weakness, so that is certainly very substantial, right? I mean, Buzzwole in its positioning has never been terrible. Like, last format might have been kind of the worst example of Buzzwole, but I also kind of feel like Buzzwole was one of the better decks last format, even though Charizard was so common. Like, it's interesting, right? I mean, Buzzwole's just such a strong deck list. Nothing's really changed about it either, which is pretty cool. So again, for the people there who don't have a ton of the new cards, Buzzwole's always going to be a really, really strong option. I included the Pheromosa version here, and I actually think that Pheromosa's probably correct. It's going to allow us to more consistently take KOs on baby Pokemon on the bench, and I think that's probably the #1 reason why we would play Pheromosa right now, quite honestly, and I just think Cyrus is a really strong win condition. A lot of decks are setting up bench Pokemon. Like, that's the reality of it. Like, like, you can play all of these sort of ramp decks and setup decks, but like when Pheromosa comes in, starts just pinging a bench Pokemon, and then we're setting up Buzzwole, we come in, and then we bring it up a Cyrus and we KO. It's like, all right, cool. Like, Buzzwole just kind of gets around a lot of the more common strategies in the format right now, and I think that's a big reason why it's really strong. Yeah, Fire is still existent. I mean, Charizard still exists, so we're including it in this video, but it's certainly not nearly as popular as it was maybe last format, where it was sort of sometimes like the 2nd or 3rd most common deck in the entire game. Buzzwole, man, Buzzwole's Buzzwole. Still incredibly good. I mean, come on, guys. All right, lastly is going to be Crobat. Actually, not lastly. There's a deck in here that is for some reason not on my screen right now. We'll pull it up. Okay, we have actually one more deck after Crobat for whatever the reason. I guess I just sort of forgot to put it in. Anyway, okay, Crobat EX. I did make a video on Crobat yesterday. It was an early version of the deck. I figured, you know, some people would change it around. It would definitely evolve as time goes on. This is kind of the most common way that people are playing Crobat right now, but quite honestly, I think there's a lot kind of wrong with this deck, or there's a lot of things that I would actually change with Crobat. About this list that we're showing here on the screen. This list here kind of encompasses everything that people are oftentimes running in Crobat right now. We've got the 2-2 EV Sylveon lineup, so of course we are just very fast-paced, very consistent. You know, Sylveon's going to draw a bunch of cards. Even though we're not playing Psychic Energies, we're just playing Dark Energies in this deck list. Like, it does still make sense to play Sylveon just so that we can draw through our deck and get that Rare Candy Crobat combo. I think that, in general, is always something that you should be doing in Crobat. It's not, I almost said unfortunately, but I think most people now with trading and Sylveon being tradable now is probably an upside. Like, most people probably have their Sylveons. The Find a Friend Eevee is the best Eevee to be playing right now, by the way. If you are playing Sylveon, it's just more consistently going to find Pokemon, which is more valuable when you are playing Sylveon. And that's a little bit of a downside to this deck as well, right? We're playing Umbreon EX, and then we're also playing Darkrai. So Umbreon is interesting. It's a very interesting card, and it does kind of work as Cyrus. But if I'm being entirely honest with you guys, I think just cutting out Umbreon and then just playing Cyrus would literally be better. So I'm not super sold on one copy of Umbreon in Crobat. That's me personally. It also doesn't poison, so that's the other thing to keep in mind here. You could play Nihilego, but I actually think Darkrai is just better than Nihilego. I kind of said that it might be in yesterday's video, but I wanted to play Nihilego to more, I guess, aggressively counterplay things like Oricorio. But again, people aren't really playing Oricorio early on in this format, so it is what it is. You don't really need to play Nihilego. I think Darkrai EX is probably just better in general, so let's include Darkrai instead of Nihilego. But yeah, what else can we even say about Crobat? I mean, Crobat EX, like I said, is the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of these rare candy decks than like Dragonite is, right? And Charizard's in the middle. Crobat is crazy because it has a 1 energy attack cost. So if you go first, you can literally on your second turn Rare Candy into Crobat, hit for 70 with Poison, and KO basically like any basic Pokemon that your opponent has in the active spot, which is really crazy. It's honestly one of the crazier things in the entire game. So it's hyper aggressive, but also kind of a high roll deck. The combined Poison plus the pings from Darkrai ends up being like over 100 damage for 1 energy on a stage 2 Pokemon with 170 HP. It's just crazy. I mean, Crobat is incredibly strong. I know it didn't perform exceptionally well in some of the early tournaments, but if I'm being honest with you, I still think Crobat is going to be one of the best decks of these entire throughout this entire season. This deck here is playing 1 silver and 1 red card, so some hand disruption, but personally, I actually feel like playing Lily in the deck is going to be a little bit better. Giant Cape is certainly needed to bring you above 180 HP, so we don't lose to those high roll decks as easily. Yeah, 1 Sabrina kind of also makes sense here. I would just play 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus. Silver's not bad. Dark Pendant's also not bad. I do like hand disruption, so if I had to change around this list at all, like if I were to play Crobat, which I might on the rank ladder, I would cut Umbreon, play Cyrus, and then I would maybe cut Silver and just play like a Mars or play like a second Cape or something like that, or maybe even a Pokemon Communications to make this deck even more aggressive and even more fast-paced. So there you go. Crobat EX, man, it's just crazy. It's crazy they released this card. The matchup spreads for Crobat are also kind of interesting. Like, it's hard to really know. Like, I think Donphan Rampardos is going to be certainly really good against Crobat. I wonder if like Giratina Darkrai is also pretty good. I feel like it kind of might be. And then of course things like Dragonite Lugia can 1-hit KO Crobat and all your Pokemon, right? So that's certainly something that we have to worry about a little bit when we're playing Crobat. And this deck list here, of course, doesn't really have any counters to Oricorio. So Oricorio is certainly going to be a pretty strong choice here, especially if you're playing any kind of healing or anything like that. But anyway, Crobat is incredibly strong. So we do actually have one more deck that I am going to include in this video. So give me 1 second, I'll pull it up and then we'll kind of dive right in. All right, guys, so the last deck that we're going to talk about in this video today is actually going to be Espeon. Do not click off this video. This is not a meme. Espeon is actually really good. When I first saw Espeon, in my mind, like it didn't really click, and I didn't fully understand why we would play Espeon or why it was really that good. And in fact, I also feel like most people still don't really realize this. And actually this list here on the screen is something that I would change myself, but this is the most common version. It also placed extremely well at a recent online tournament. The thing here is the combination of Sylveon and Espeon makes this deck incredibly consistent, right? We're playing 4 EVs. We have the Find a Friend EV, which again pulls Pokemon out of the deck. Highly likely for that to be a Sylveon EX to draw more cards. EV EX is able to 1-hit KO baby Pokemon, also has a high amount of HP and lives an attack from Crobat. Espeon is doing 80 damage for 2, and so is Sylveon. It's doing 70 damage for 2, but Espeon's psychic healing ability is way better than I ever expected it to be. The combination of EV Bag and psychic healing allows us to heal a ton of damage in one turn. The psychic healing ability is not limited to once per turn in total. It's once per turn per Espeon. So if you're able to go from one Espeon into another, you can effectively heal 60 damage in one turn. EV Bag can heal 20 from multiple evolutions at once, right? So you can heal upwards of, 40, 60, 80 damage in one turn with EV Bag, and we're playing 2 of them, plus the psychic healing. This deck is super, super sticky. It just kind of, hangs out for a very long time. And against decks that don't do a ton of damage, like, it actually kind of walls a lot of those deck lists here. So let's get into this specific deck list. Of course, 2 EV, 2 EV EX, 2 Sylveon, 2 Espeon, and then one of the Evo Harmony Sylveons, which is really here for Oricorio, but it's also the highest damaging Pokemon in the deck. If our board is filled with evolutions, Sylveon does 130, which is a lot of damage. With EV Bag, that goes up to potentially 150. So Sylveon is not just there for Oricorio, it's also there to just be kind of the hardest hitter in the entire deck. And I kind of do like it. I think that you could still go to timer against Oricorio pretty consistently if you're playing Sylveon, or if you're not playing the non-EX Sylveon. So if you want to beat Oricorio, I would play Sylveon, which of course, if you tie in ranked battles, it gets rid of your win streaks. Keep that in mind. But I think it's probably still correct for sure. It makes the deck a little bit less consistent, but it's probably worth it. 2 Research, 2 Pokeball for sure, and then 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus, which I also think is correct, and then 1 Giant Cape, 1 Mars, 1 Guzma. These are the cards that I would kind of consider changing. So there's one card in particular that I'm going to tell you right now. If you're watching this video right now, there is a secret sauce. There is a particular card that works exceptionally well with Espeon, in my mind, and that is actually Lyra. I haven't seen a lot of people do this, but in my testing, Lyra in Espeon is broken, right? It allows us to free retreat into Espeon. You could even play X speed. You could go Lyra, or if your Espeon's in the active spot and it gets attacked, you can heal up, use Lyra, retreat back into your other Espeon, and then heal either the active Espeon or your bench Espeon. That's the crazy part about the psychic healing abilities. You can heal any of your Pokemon, so it's just like 60 healing every turn to whatever Pokemon you want, which is just in general very, very crazy. 1 copy of Giant Cape, but I would play multiple copies of Giant Cape. I just think there's enough Pokemon that can KO you, like Giratina, Darkrai, and Charizard. So 2 copies of Giant Cape is probably what I would run. Guzma is interesting, but I would maybe consider swapping Guzma for something like a red. I think red might be even better in this deck list. But anyway, the Psychic type Evolution deck is just way better than I ever considered it to be. It's probably the #1 tempo deck in the entire game right now. Way too consistent. Going second, this deck is crazy. You can lead off with Find a Friend and thin your deck, or you can lead with EVX to deal 30 damage, and then on turn 2, deal 80 plus damage, right, with Espeon or with Sylveon and EV Bag. It's really fast-paced, really aggressive. It sticks around for a very long time. The healing is actually a massive deal in certain matchups, and it is just in general one of the most impressive decks that I just did not see coming, which is why I left it for the end of this video. In fact, I'll probably slap Espeon right front and center on the thumbnail here, so you guys know what this video is really all about. Yeah, do not sleep on this deck. Play around with it a little bit. I don't think that this list for here is necessarily fully optimized yet, but the combination of Sylveon and Espeon is way better, like way better than I ever expected it to be, which to me is kind of the #1 surprise currently in the format. Yes, there's a lot of Giratina and Darkrai running around, a lot of Crobats running around. Espeon is weak to Dark, but in general, I don't even think that matchup is that bad. I'll be entirely honest with you, but Espeon, Sylveon, pleasantly surprised. Again, tool around with the deck a little bit. We'll see how it evolves over the next few weeks, but certainly one of my favorite new decks. One of the decks I was just completely surprised by. I think this deck is actually completely broken. It actually makes total sense why they gave us Crobat and Dragonite, because those are really the only 2 things that I think consistently beat Sylveon, Espeon, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, if you wanted to play kind of some new spice here, this is honestly one of my top new decks in the entire game right now. I would highly recommend running it. And yeah, that's it, guys. I think that was 9 total decks, so we put 8 in here, but there was 1 here at the end, so you got that extra 9th deck in the video. I apologize, we went over 30 minutes, but hopefully you guys enjoyed, and hopefully you guys have a really strong first week of grinding ranked battles. We'll be back with an updated collection or list of the best decks for ranked battles next week, because a lot will change. And then this weekend is the first large tournaments of this new format. Going to be really fun, so stick around for Meta Monday, and then we'll do a tier list on Tuesday. I'm actually really excited to do that, but all in due time for sure. We might stream some ranked battles this weekend as well, so stick around. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later, and yeah. Bye.